being a hermit, one lives a bit outside the planet looking on. It's a calm sort of way of passing through existence. A calm sort of way, because one looks basically above what's going on in the immediate, in the sense that one is outside time a little bit. There are certain constants in the equation. One generation can talk to the next, and one soul can talk to another soul, even when that soul has gone on, because there are certain things that a soul can leave, and the classic way of doing it is putting it on the page. Now, of course, there are other means as well, storing voices, but nevertheless, the ancient means of communication, bits of soul to bits of future soul, is through what is put down on paper, on papyrus, parchment, whatever it might be, but nothing has changed in that. In other words, we're still listening and feeling those who have gone before us through the silent page they left behind. So in that sense, writing, if one chisels things into a form which can be looked at again with joy, is something that one leaves behind and leaves a little grace perhaps for others to pick up way down the line. Yeah, one has to look on with a certain philosophic mode onto passing things, including pain. One can be conquered by pain which is physical or pain which is spiritual, human, moral, psychological. But if we pass through life in such a way that we're not conquered, we can, as it were, get above that level. That is only really possible with divine grace, because otherwise the danger is that humanity will be damaged by the immediate. If one is living a little bit bathed in that Trinitarian presence, it's a little bit different, because one sees there's another power in control and a wisdom which allows things, which we call divine providence, which, as we know from what was given to us way back, where somebody, the first person ready to write in modern English of some sort was our own hermit Julian of Norwich, way back in the Middle Ages, a recluse. And she was given to understand by the Lord that there's a providence which guides the world. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And by that, she was given to understand that nothing at all happened without divine permission, that it was pushing things towards our good, pulling good even out of its apparent harm. So in that case, one can calmly accept the divine will as it comes through divine permissions, and go into what the Lord is trying to say in that, and be positive rather than negative. The only real tragedy is to lose one's soul. That is the game of the other guy, I think you know what I mean, the one who lives down there on ground zero or beneath. He wants our soul and he wants our company, so he's very clever at getting it. It's by the immediate, and the immediate isn't all that lasting. People sacrifice the eternal for the sake of the immediate. So that is what is happening. With divine grace, however, it's quite different, because one is not living just for the immediate. But your question is quite a poignant question. What does one do if one hasn't got divine grace? Well, it's not so simple, because as we have in the Gospel actually this weekend, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. It's only through the cross and through divine grace that we can get there. So it's quite serious if one thinks about what the Lord is trying to warn us about. It's not automatic pie in the sky when we die and all that. We have to kind of get our act together. So people who are not getting their act together are secretly nudged and nibbled by their conscience. They're not in peace. There's only deep peace when one is in the will of the Saviour. Otherwise it's a kind of a dumbing effect, to dumb down the pain, distract yourself, escape the reality. There's no happiness there. As the Rolling Stones so eloquently put it, I can't get no satisfaction. there is a purifying iter, journey which happens in solitude, because one, in the initial stages of letting go and having only silence and solitude and only the interior guest, then there's a whole video of one's past that comes up. They say that actually happens at death as well, but all the past comes up. But then things change a little bit, and one goes towards the interior guest, and one starts to talk a lot to him, in fact only to him, because he's the only one there. And then there's a peace in what he sends us. God is enough. But the other guy and the other stuff that's in there tries to come back to the surface, and it's a continuous battle. But there is a peace and divine will. In fact, there's no deep peace outside it. So if one is in the will of God, then things are pacified on every level. To make your question actually directly relevant to what happened in my case, it was complicated by the fact precisely that I was writing a lot, and in the Carthusians that wasn't going down well, so I was being told all the time to more or less leave or stop writing, and that was a tension. So there were elements coming in there which were kind of dodgy. In the sense that could have been avoided, but it wasn't avoided and it wasn't caught in time, so I had to leave eventually. So that's what happened to me. It ended up okay, because the Bishop of Meath took me in as a hermit, so I'm able to calmly be here on my own. But there's a providence in that too. It caused confusion because I was getting close to ordination, and I'd studied all those years there in the solitude of France, and I was ready for it, and then all this came to the surface. It was made even more complex by the fact that the Archbishop who had confirmed me in Welsh got involved, and he wrote to the Superior of the Order itself. So it already made it worse, actually, because when that came to the fore, there was clearly given indication that if that's the case, you have to be leaving. So things happen. But I say there's a divine permission. One takes even that on board with calm. Well, in the purely eremitic life, one is pretty close to eternity in the sense that a lot of one's time is spent, in my case, before the Blessed Sacrament. That's actually one advantage over being a Carthusian. If one is a hermit under the bishop, and if the bishop is supportive, one has access to the Blessed Sacrament, one has one's own chapel, one can expose the Blessed Sacrament a lot, day and night, and be in adoration, and the chanting of the office. I still chant the office completely as it was in the monastery itself, only different tones. So that's completely sung. There a high proportion is spent before the Creator, the Maker, the King, and in that sense there's a deep peace, because when one is before the Lord in chapel with the angels, one is not alone. And how many angels they're adoring with one. It's very peaceful. One comes into a cushion of prayer and presence, a double presence, the presence of the Lord, the presence of his angels. So one is not alone at all, especially in the night. One feels it in the depth of night when the world is fast asleep. One is a little beacon of light awake, trying to keep the world from going into utter and complete darkness and suicide and all that goes with it in the hours of night. Ironically, one gets used to silence in such a way that it becomes difficult to break it, because the mode of being in perpetual silence is that one then goes completely into another direction, not towards human beings, but towards the inner guest. And talking then is kind of a portal which leaks, it lets out the interior of the soul into conversation. And conversation can be kind of very distracting. Actually, it's quite ironic, but in the Carthusian order, there is the discipline of the weekly walk as a safety valve. But in one's weekly confession, nearly all the sins that one is confessing are from those moments of talking with other people, because anything else is kind of invisible. And that's where all the leakage happens. And also, one talks about one's past. So if one isn't talking at all the past goes away, one just is present with the Lord, and one doesn't have to talk about one's interior being to anyone at all. Only the Lord knows one's secrets. So one is completely hidden, anonymous, and passing through this existence without drawing attention to oneself or being known by anybody. It's a different way of going through life. 1 minute after entering the Carthusians, there one leaves the world and the world doesn't come back because one is very much separated from the world. And remember, a life without talking, without telephone, without internet, without anything at all with regard to contact with the world is pretty different, and therefore one is, as it were, outside the world already with 1 foot in the beyond. It's a very different world really, because one's friends there are the invisible friends, the angels and the saints, and therefore, to answer your question, one becomes immediately aware of the difference. The strict monastic life, the strict one now, as it is tacitly lived, does place one completely in a different atmosphere and world. It's even more difficult today to be still. If you look at people and study their behavior, immediately when they're waiting for something or there's a pause, they go into their pocket and take up the mobile phone, which is now not just I'm talking to you on an old Nokia, which is kind of medieval, but nowadays they have a Samsung thing which does everything for you. It's a whole television in your pocket, it's a computer in your pocket, it's everything in your pocket, it's the whole world in your pocket. So they take that to bed with them, and even married people who take it to bed with them, and that thing is more important than the wife. So think about how can God get into that mess? It's crowding out the voice of God. So without all that mess, one can hear far more the still small voice. People are handicapped, people are crippled out there in the world, they're hyped up, they can't be still. The great philosopher, French philosopher Blaise Pascal said, tout le malheur de l'homme réside dans le fait qu'il n'arrive pas à s'asseoir dans une pièce et ne rien faire. All the misery of man resides in the fact that he can't sit alone in a room and do nothing. Self-sufficient, he is a cripple, and the fact that he's not able just to be alone is a real tragedy for humanity. The quality of life is deteriorated because man is no longer able to hear the beauty of simple things. He has to be hyped up by big impulses. It's not the best way to be. In solitude and silence, a little thing goes a long way. A book is hugely powerful. The sound of music is extremely moving. People are completely dulled and dumbed down by the number of impulses. They are actually impoverished humanly, and their memory too is weakened because there are too many syllables coming in. Man way back had a stronger memory. He read more and he maintained and retained what he was reading. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of unnecessary syllables in the air. It's doing us harm. We're saturated with syllables and meanings and sounds. If a person wants to find both himself and God and actually also his neighbor, he has to simplify life. Life simplified. The beauty of simple things, e.g. having the phone off, except maybe once a day to catch up on everything in one go, is a completely different day. Having access, availability all the time to all the world is a very different mode of being. And one goes through life and one comes to the end of one's life. Where did my life go? It went to immediate availability. It went into being called by everything that was calling. Or if one can come to the end of one's life, I lived independently. I was not controlled. I was in control of my life. And that one can actually claim. It's called being in complete control of one's day. It can be done. One doesn't have to be always with people, and people don't have to be always in our head. There are ways and means of structuring one's day. If one wants to, one can, and not going to everything. One doesn't have to say yes to everything, every meeting, every encounter, every conversation, every bit of stuff coming at the screen. You don't have to have all that. A day with a book is quiet. A day with a screen is noisy. There was a whole lot of stuff going on actually in the 60s in Britain. Billy Graham came to Britain, there was massive crusade in 1967. That had an effect, but already before then I was involved, and I was going more and more towards the evangelicals, and my own pastor stopped me, and we had a good chat, and he realized what I was going to go if he didn't stop me. So anyway, I stayed in the Baptist church. He baptized me in Welsh, of course, and then, but then what happened was, because I was then going towards the ministry, I was reading a lot, and I actually got involved accidentally with the Catholic Church. I remember being deeply moved by going into a Catholic church and going to a high mass one Sunday morning. I was about 13 or 14, no, of course, 14 I would say, and it was still in that, in the high mass, and I was very, very moved by the mystery of it. So I had to think, what's going on here? There's far more history and mystery in their thing than in ours. So I went more and more towards the Catholic Church, and then the vocation followed. So the local Catholic Church, which I was going to then from 15 or so onwards, 15, 16, was the Catholic Church run by Ampleforth, Benedictine therefore. It was in Cardiff, and there were 6 or 7 monks there from Ampleforth, one from Buckfast, and they got me involved with the Benedictine world. So my vocation also matured under them, because they were very good actually. They had a semi-monastic life in their mission. There were 120 monks in the community, and they had 6 or 7 of them in Cardiff, with their own monastic life as well there, but they're very good pastors as well, and great liturgy. So I was born along the way. It was a vocation in a good parish community, nourished by the spirituality of Ampleforth. How was the actual texture of the content there and evolved? Is that what you mean? Well, you see, because, it's a long story, but there's a gap when I went back to my studies, and then things go there in a different mode there. Although actually that was quite a rich experience, because you were doing theology in Bangor with other students, future ministers and so on. That was a very rich experience. And back to the Welsh culture, doing theology in Welsh. See, I could have stayed put there. A lot was going on there as well, because there was a move to get something started in Wales itself. And also the involvement with the huge charismatic renewal in the monastic world in France. That's all there as well. Seeing miracles happening before one's eyes. There was a massive renewal in France in the mid-80s, and I was involved in it. We were hoping to bring that back to Wales at one point. And all that is in there as well. The amazing things that were going on. In the charismatic renewal there in the monastic world, they were opening monasteries at the rate of 2 monasteries a year. And it was very powerful. So there was an attempt to found one in Wales. All that is in there as well. What happened in those amazing years of oscillation, but then it calmed down eventually. My spiritual father sent me back to Ireland, and I was sorted out here. Although I had to go for a while actually to Italy. That's when I was ordained, Rome and so on. All that is in there as well. The attraction of Italy. So there's a lot of moving around there within the monastic world. So the whole story is there day by day. That was the period then, volume 2, there's a lot happening there. It could have gone either way, lots of things could have happened. Well, to be honest, things which could have happened didn't happen, because there was not an awful lot of encouragement from bishops and that kind of thing. You see, they were very chary about anything new of that nature, and so I accepted that it wasn't the divine will. But I think it's an awful pity, because we see there were lost vocations, Welsh-speaking vocations. There are Welsh priests out there, but we've gone elsewhere, out of the country, whereas Wales could have harnessed all that and got a good foundation in the heart of the Welsh language area of Wales. That had a huge influence on Wales, but it didn't happen because the bishops weren't too keen on risking anything. It's become more Dominican insofar as I took on board his teaching. St. Dominic, as it's crystallized in the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest Dominicans of all time, he has his teaching, that is Thomas Aquinas, he analyzes the whole structure of the religious life, and he says, in conclusion, it is better to give light and warmth than just to be a light. In other words, it's contemplari et contemplata aliis tradere, to contemplate and to give unto others the things contemplated. Because I do have one Holy Mass in public a week, it's the Latin one on a Sunday, and there that will be partly recorded and transmitted, and the teaching going out on YouTube, lecture quite a few souls, and therefore there's an element of sharing what is coming. So that wouldn't have been there certainly in the Carthusian period, except perhaps in the writing, which was stuck, of course. To answer your question, there would be an evolution there also since ordination. That happened in 1997. Since ordination, by the very fact of being a priest, one is a man for others, even though it's based basically in the monastic life and in contemplation in my case. Nevertheless, if one is a priest, one is ordained to give the sacraments, and therefore one has a lot of confessions, which of course wouldn't have happened in the Carthusian order at all, and certainly preaching wouldn't either. So there's been an element of giving what has been received. Involuntary things go towards the eremitic life purely because the whole thing is calmed down. There's a certain peace and serenity comes because once the bishop took me on board, things became clearer. You see, I've been seeing the bishop every month all these years, and he would come here every beginning of every month for years and years and years, and then now he's got too old. He's retired now, and I go to him because he doesn't drive anymore. But it's still happening. He stabilized me. He was a good father, and that's what a bishop, a real bishop is. A good father, not just an administrator, but somebody who cares, who listens, and who gives you good advice. So he was giving me good advice. So when I was under him, I was safe. And that, by the way, is a hint for anyone who's listening. Find a good spiritual father, and you're safe. The fact that it is indestructible, the difference between the soul and the body, which is its envelope, is that the body is material and therefore destined to go into the destruction of the material in death. It'll be dissolved. But the soul does not depend on the body for its functioning. The proof is that when people have death experiences and come back, they'll tell you that the body has been there, they've looked at the body, and they've been going on. It's a separate existence. The soul, therefore, is immaterial, and all that's immaterial is not limited by the material, and therefore by death. It can't stop being. Once a soul is ignited and conceptual, the parents create, that is, procreate, but there's a sacrality about the moment of starting off a new life, which is divine. They collaborate with the Creator, because the Creator sparks a new soul into being at every conception, and therefore implants an immortal soul into what is mortal. What is immaterial is linked for a while to the material, but is not going to be limited by it. So that soul is what we call Eve eternal. Now, an aevum is a span of time, and eternitas is an eternity. An angel, anything outside God, which is of an immaterial nature, an angel, or a demon, which is a fallen angel, or a human soul, has had a beginning, but will have no end. It cannot end because it's immaterial, it's spiritual, and it has to go on. And therefore, the big issue is caring not for what is going to perish and go back into dust, but for the bit that's going to go on. And that's where people get it wrong. They give great care to the body, and beauty is very important, but the beauty of the soul is neglected, and that's the one thing that counts. Because, as I said earlier on, the one tragedy is not to make it, not to get to heaven, to lose one's soul. And that's where the devil is busy, making sure that no one is thinking about the real thing. The crunch is one moment after death. Have I made it? There's a cross here, an old cross just nearby in Newgrange. It's not Newgrange, Monaster Boys. It's very, very old, and it has on it, these old Celtic crosses with the gospel on them. They're ancient crosses, high crosses. Well, there, in that old monastery, there's a soul in the scales, all nude, and he's a bit nervous. He's not quite sure which way he's going to go, up or down, and it's forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. He's nervous. So that's what people should be concerned about. The big thing, the crunch, one moment after death. Am I ready to go or not? Do you know, that is the big trick of the enemy. They think that by arguing against it, they can cancel it. Well, one can't. What is in the brain is in the brain. What is out there, even after death, even if it's invisible, is out there. And whether one believes it or not, it doesn't make any difference. It's there. On Amazon, yeah, they want you to go on Amazon, it goes anywhere they want to just go into Amazon for the David Jones. Now, the actual title is, it's Latin. I'll explain the title if you want to. Ad Majestatem, A-D, add to, Majestatem or Majestatem, but it's an I in Latin. It looks like Majestatem, but Majestatem, towards the majesty. Now that's the title that one uses in monastic life in choir. When the choir is facing not the other choir, but facing the altar, it's turned towards the majesty. So basically it's in two words, the whole thrust of it. All one's life is towards the praise of glory. Yeah, it's an old term, and as it happens, it was published, the start of it anyway, when Prince Charles was crowned King of England. So I sent him the first copy, more or less, because I wanted also is the corresponding. It's Christ is the High King, but he's serving the King. The High King, the King of England, has to serve the King of Glory, and with his Christian roots, he's aware of that. So I gave him that, and he wrote back, and he was quite pleased. He was touched by the fact that it'd been dedicated to him. So there's an element there of something happening as well, the crowning of the King of England, who is at the service of the King of Glory. God bless you, and God will bless your ministry.